Well, Australia is considering imposing additional sanctions on Russia if it launches a new invasion of Ukraine. Joining us live now is the Labor Senator Kimberley Kitching. Senator, good to see you. Thanks for your time this morning. So do you think the so-called Magnitsky sanctions should be applied to Russia?
Look, I think Magnitsky sanctions are obviously they're country agnostic, so they could be applied. And of course, Magnitsky legislation was first formulated because of Sergei Magnitsky, a tax accountant employed by an Anglo-American, Bill Browder, who had a hedge fund in Russia. He discovered that the Russian state had embezzled about $230 million US. And he also was taken to a Bosco jail where he was tortured to death. So this act really did apply firstly to Russia and firstly in the United States. But what I think Australia can do is we can act with like-minded countries, with our allies. We are the fourth of the Five Eyes to have Magnitsky legislation. And I think that we can, from there, we can, the National Security Committee of Cabinet may choose, they are receiving the intelligence briefings, they may choose to impose sanctions, as the Foreign Minister has said in recent days, that's something that they are considering.
Yeah, and for
so look, I think the process.
Yeah, so for those who aren't aware, it's basically the freezing of assets here, it can't be used as any kind of safe haven.
No, that's right. And that's what we exactly want. We want fewer and fewer places that people who engage in human rights abuses, those who engage in large-scale corruption, and in the Australian legislation we also have a provision for those that commit breaches of cyber security, so those that are engaged in cyber hacking, they can be penalised, they can be sanctioned under this Act, assets can be frozen. So obviously it's quite a significant power that resides with the Foreign Minister. The Foreign Minister must consult with the Attorney General and any other ministers whom he or she of the day would need to consult with. But I think that this is something what we all want. I think is Ukrainian sovereignty and Ukrainian territorial their territory to be protected. So I think this is something that we can look at.
Yeah, Australia's a fairly small player when it comes to this stoush in Eastern Europe. Are there many assets that would in fact be seized? And then when it comes to Magnitsky, where do you draw the line? Is it just Putin, or is it his inner circle? Where does that end? Or all businesses?
I think anyone who has engaged. Well, I think anyone who's engaged in human rights abuses or has been engaged in large-scale corruption. Remember, those are people in positions of power who are stealing from their own compatriots. So what they are doing is taking from their own people, taking that money, looking for a safe haven, using our, excellent protections that we have in our system. Yeah. And we have an excellent Torrens title, a land title system. And we shouldn't really be allowing these people to use our system against our values. And that's what they seek to do. So obviously we've seen, some of the Russian oligarchs who seem to, buy up large swathes of London, so in the good parts of London. What we don't want to see, and what our allies in the UK don't want to see, is those people being able to use to park money that they've stolen from their own people and park it in a very safe, a safe place to invest. And so I think that really it's great that we have this legislation, and we'll see if if the government decides to apply sanctions to those involved in the Ukraine.
Okay, just on to China. There's a new ambassador, Zhao Quan, who is reportedly a bit more dovish than his predecessor. What are your thoughts on what you've been able to see so far?
Well, of course, we welcome all new ambassadors. I think it's true, as you say, Pete, that Ambassador Zhao is not considered a wolf warrior. He's considered a far more orthodox ambassador. And, hopefully, as he says, he's hoping to have discussions. Let's hope that they're successful. And, what we've seen, I think, with China in our region is not just assertiveness, but really some aggression. So maybe the foreign ministry in Beijing has learnt perhaps that wolf warrior diplomacy hasn't really been that successful. I think, in fact, what it's done is unite, in Washington, it's united both sides of the aisle as well as here. And in fact, I wouldn't just say it's bipartisanship, I would say it's multi-partisanship.
Yeah. I mean, he hopes, he's quoted as saying he wants to work closely with officials to try and get relations back on track, but isn't he just a servant of his master?
Well, I guess we'll see what he's able to cable back to Beijing. You know, obviously the deputy head of mission Wang is there, and you know, he had trouble with the 14 grievances in that he said it didn't go far enough. So we'll see how that all works at the Chinese embassy. But we'll also hope that Ambassador Xiao is able to convince Beijing that, you know, that maybe wolf warrior diplomacy has not been successful, and that really the assertiveness and aggression, sometime aggression we've seen from Beijing, hopefully comes to an end.
Yeah. Time will tell, as they say. Senator Kimberley Kitching, thanks for your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks very much, Pete.